You know that Keeley Companies is all about fostering the world-class culture through their incredible cultural pillars. Well, it was time to add a seventh cultural pillar, Keeley Green. Guided by the mission to raise the sustainability standards by which they design, build, operate, and live, Keeley Green is dedicated to using a holistic approach to leave a positive impact on our environment, create a future that is sustainable for generations to come. In the words of Rusty Keeley, we are just getting started. You can learn more about that just getting started mentality and all the work they do by visiting my friends at Keeley Companies online at KeeleyCompanies.com.
Welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. John is the two-time national best-selling author of On Fire and In Awe. He's a world-class inspirational speaker, the host of the Live Inspired podcast, and he's the real-life inspiration behind the major motion picture Soul on Fire. Each week, John interviews extraordinary individuals about their life stories so you can more fully live your life story. Here's your host, John O'Leary.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. You're in for an awesome journey today. I'm just telling you right now, get your climbing shoes on, grab a backpack, maybe a water bottle or something else to slide into that bottle, because you're going to have an incredible experience during this journey together. Why? Well, let me tell you a little bit about the guy who is going to be our lead on this walk, and then a little bit about why it matters to you. So our friend today, his name is Brad Ryan. Brad Ryan is a wildlife veterinarian. He's a conservationist. He's a best-selling author whose remarkable journey with his grandmother has inspired millions. You've probably seen whispers of this story somewhere online or on television. After battling depression and anxiety and suicidal ideation for years, Brad made one courageous decision. Midlife, he said, I'm going to take my 85-year-old grandmother camping so she can see her very first ever mountain. It was one of her dreams. He helped make it a reality. Well, that trip grew into an 8-year adventure to all 63 United States national parks. It also transformed both of their lives and made them social media darlings. Apparently, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90-year-old women climbing mountains will do that. During today's conversation, Brad shares how nature became a place of healing, the surprising lessons he learned from Grandma Joy, and yes, that is her real name, Grandma Joy, and why courage often begins with a simple yes. Together, we discuss mental health and forgiveness and family and purpose and the extraordinary impact of choosing connection over isolation. Family. If you have ever felt stuck, overwhelmed, or wondered whether your life can truly change, I'm telling you right now, this conversation is for you. You will be inspired to say yes to adventure, invest in the people you love, and trust that even the smallest acts of courage can truly change a life, maybe even your own. So let's go on this hike together with my friend, now yours. His name, family, is Brad Ryan. Dr. Brad Ryan, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
Hey, thanks, John.
Well, man, it's not all the time that I have the opportunity of bringing a true friend on here. I had the opportunity of meeting you 7 years ago. And even back then, I knew you had a story. Then I read it in a book recently and was blown away. So if I happened to meet you at a trailhead and I said, hey, man, I'm John, and you said, I'm Brad. If I said to you, Brad, tell me about you, where do you even begin going with that question? So, Brad, tell me about you.
I think I would begin as a little boy in Duncan Falls, Ohio, which is a town you probably have never heard of unless you've followed Interstate 60 down the Muskingum River from Zanesville, Ohio, in the southeastern part of the state. Appalachian foothills. Very humble beginning. My first exposure to nature was with my grandma Joy, who would take me to our local state park and get into the stream with me to catch crawdads and minnows and snails and frogs. And I was enchanted with nature from the very beginning of my life, and that stayed with me for really the rest of my life. I got to work at a conservation facility as a teenager, working in a rhino barn. So I became very passionate about wildlife conservation and all the threats that our natural world faces. I moved to South Africa in my 20s to pursue a master's degree in mammalian biology, and I studied spotted hyenas. in Kruger National Park. And then my biggest dream was to go to vet school, but I really struggled to get into vet school because I was a better writer than I was a chemist or a physicist. And so despite my best efforts, I didn't get through physics the first two times I took it. And so I decided to hike the Appalachian Trail in 2009. And as a result of that, I had a chance to think about a lot of different things in my life. And so I wanted to give vet school another chance. So I did become a wildlife veterinarian. And I definitely tie that back to my childhood and my grandma Joy taking me into those stream waters in Blue Rock State Park.
Hmm.
And the other thing that I would say is that I'm a person who really struggled with self-esteem. I grew up gay in this little Appalachian foothill town, and my father was a type A deer hunter, all-star athlete, and that created a lot of damage and a lot of strain in our relationship. And after my parents' divorce, I became estranged from my father and from my paternal grandmother, Grandma Joy, because there was just so much grievance in our family, and I inherited that. Just like I inherited Grandma Joy's smile, I inherited her stubborn, grudge-holding ways, and my father was the same way. But the AT softened me, and it gave me a chance to reflect on my life for 6 months, and I did reach out to her, but that was just the very beginning of trying to learn how to let go, to let go of the places that were so deeply entrenched in my soul that just couldn't let go of the pain. And it's a bit of who I am, but
Just so the listeners know and the viewers who are tuning in on YouTube, like that's the story as we tie our shoes at the trailhead. As we step forward through a man who's taken some wild journeys in life, not just in nature, but in life, you're going to be glad you come along for the walk on this one. So, my friends, tie him up a little tighter. We're going to take a bunch of steps during this journey. So, my first question to you is, it seems as if even as a child, you were drawn to nature. What was it about nature that you felt solace or peace or wholeness?
I mean, first of all, that's where we're from. And I think that, when we look at the trajectory of human evolution, the things that we've become disconnected from that were so fundamental to who we are nature and probably connection, intergenerational connection, societal
Yeah.
societies that have, all the generations at the table. And so definitely nature is the place where you can turn off the noise and quiet the brain. It is the hardest thing to do in life, meditation, right? Is to stop those persistent thoughts that are just circling and circling and circling. And that doesn't completely stop when you're in nature, but I do find that it grounds you. It
Right.
grounds what's really important in life. And we miss the miracle so often of our conscious existence because we're trying to meet deadlines and we're racing to this appointment and that appointment and getting this project handed in and getting home to pick up the kids and take them, get dinner on the table and do all these things, right? And we forget to look up at the stars and we forget to feel the grass under our feet and just be human and just be.
Yeah.
And so that to me is the biggest thing, is because I think we're all just hyper stimulated and it's so difficult to just take that deep breath and not think about all the things we have to do
Yeah.
and think about, the chances that I would ever be here are so infinitesimal, and here I am. And we don't stop to do that enough in life. And I don't think we want to wait until our dying day to have that epiphany.
Well, that's strong. So, to my left, as you look at me, to my right, there's a picture of the prodigal son painted by Rembrandt. And it's this picture of a dad coming down and just hugging his son. There's so much about this picture I love. But in a book by Henry Nouwen called The Return of the Prodigal Son, the question was asked, like, why would Jesus refer to God as a father? Like, is the creator of this universe male? And very clearly, probably, no, not at all. So why call the creator father? And it's because, in Henry Nouwen's mind, many of us would not have the kind of dad that we could turn to as children or later on in life. And so we
Right.
needed an example of what it looked like to have a real father in our lives, because many of us will grow up with no idea of what that looks like. And it sounds to me from reading your book and knowing your story, like you grew up without having that safe, grace-filled, loving, compassionate man in your life. Talk a little bit about your relationship and the desire for approval from your dad that you never really found.
Well, the expectation was that I was going to fulfill his unfulfilled dreams, that I was going to make it to the Major League Baseball team. What a bar to set, right? Duncan Falls, Ohio, right? I didn't make it to the major leagues, but this guy will. And the same thing happened with, I came to understand that he went through the same thing with his father. And I guess one of the things that I learned is that I could navigate that. I could navigate the expectations that he had for me that I knew disappointed him because I couldn't be that person. I wasn't that person. I just
Right.
had my nose in a book. And if I didn't have my nose in the book, I was on my bike or I was catching toads in the yard. But what did light him up is when I had a straight A report card.
Okay.
And so we all have to kind of find that way to kind of shape shift. I think we don't think of it that way, but is it that you're looking for that light in their eye? You're looking for that that smile, that yeah, you're enough look
Yeah.
in those words. And then when we find what works, then that becomes not only a source of pride, but it's almost a survival mechanism.
Interesting.
And so that's why, and this obviously relates to why I had such a hard fall in vet school, because it didn't occur to me at the time, but that was my entire sense of self-worth, was my ability to be a high performing academic person.
Mm.
And I can say that my father messed up in so many ways, but I am grateful that, given that I'm from this two traffic light town in a place where very few people get out, that I think I became successful in part because he wanted me to be.
Wow.
But that perfectionism that came out of that was something that took a lot of years or it took a lot of years to recognize how detrimental that was, and
Yeah.
even more to be able to reality check those kind of unrealistic expectations for myself. But that was certainly what worked for the time being when I was a kid.
You talked about vet school and you wrote about it, and it was your heart, man. You loved animals, you love nature. Here's a perfect collection of the academic movement toward nature and the ability to love animals and love nature. And yet you were in a darker place in vet school than anybody knew, maybe even more than you knew. So talk about that time. What was going on in your life?
When I graduated, the senior superlatives came out, and I was in a class of 162 students, and they voted me the student with the best sense of humor. They thought I was the funniest guy in the auditorium. And I was just absolutely consumed with thoughts of suicidal ideation for most of that time period, up until the point where I took that first road trip with my grandmother. And I did not think that was going to happen. I hiked the AT in 2009. I stood on the summit of Mount Katahdin in Maine, believing that I could manifest anything in life. And I did manifest getting into vet school. And it was a long haul to get there. I was 31 when I started. And when I did my application to vet school was all about the advantages of taking the long road in life, that I could fly from
Right.
Georgia in a couple hours, but because I hiked it, all this abundance came into my life. And so I just thought, yeah, you just take all that confidence and you just plug and chug, and off we go. And it's 162 people that are just like you in a way. They all were the top of their class. They were all as passionate as they needed to be able to get one of those few seats that were available to them. Vet school was so competitive.
Mm.
Thousands apply to Ohio State every year, and 162 get to step into that auditorium. And I had never worked harder in my life, John, and I was never getting worse grades. And it snowballed. I mean, it just got in my head from the very beginning. And then I had test anxiety, and then this profound imposter syndrome. And I questioned
Yes.
why I must have gotten in just because I was clever enough to frame it the way I did, to like I knew how to market myself or whatever it was. But really, you're not smart enough to be here. Like, this was a mistake. I just turned on myself. I had a lot of bullying in my life from my father and from others and from society, but no one ever spoke to me as viciously as I did in vet school.
There's so many directions I want to take it. I want to talk about David Hilton. I think, though, I want to start by talking about here you are nominated, voted the essentially happiest go lucky, most humorous, most hilarious guy in the entire class. And right below the grin and the smile and the jokes is the man who wants out of life. Help me unpack that. How can a kid, a young guy with the entire life in front of him, and everyone knows is the most joyful guy around, also when the door shuts and the light flickers off, you are in such a dark place that you're not sure you can take the next step forward in life.
Well, it's about performing. It's about shame. It's a coping strategy for shame, I think, because what would have been the most helpful thing that I could have done in that moment is looked another human being in the eye and told them what I was going through so that perhaps the other people who were performing, maybe not to the degree that I was, but people who maybe were struggling with self-doubt on some level in that spectrum could connect with me and make me feel less alone and perhaps even support me. That's what didn't happen. And I think we could do a whole
For sure.
day on mental health and veterinary medicine and these caregiving professions and high performing academic perfectionistic personalities. But like everything about it, getting into vet school, you're not going to show your vulnerability. You're not going to show your Achilles heel because you want that dream to come true so badly, right? And then you get in and you think, man, I mean, at least in my mind, it was like if I tell a colleague that I'm thinking about killing myself, they're going to be like, we got to get this guy out of here. We got to put him in a hospital or something. And then it was all for nothing. That's
Yeah.
what I thought was going to happen.
So what ultimately changed for you? Because here you and I are having this conversation, and you, as folks are about to hear, you've lived already an amazing life, but you barely got here. So what changed?
Well, I showed up to my radiology rotation on my fourth year, clinical year, and I walked into the teaching hospital, and there had been whispers about a missing second year veterinary student on our campus named David Hilton, who didn't show up for his urinary exam a few days prior. Nobody knew where he went. When I walked into the teaching hospital, I could see my dean and my associate dean of student affairs in a conversation, and their faces looked severe, very, very concerned. And I found out when I got to the radiology suite that David Hilton's body had been found. And so he did take his life. And we were Facebook friends. We met casually, but I didn't know him well. But I started scrolling through my phone on his Facebook feed and looking at all these pictures, and he looked as joyful as I did.
Mm.
Not in the moment, but the front that I was putting on, he was doing that too. I paced the hall. It was really dark as it needs to be in a radiology suite. And I went to the bathroom, and I looked in the mirror at myself as I had done so often. And usually I would look in the mirror at the end of a long day, and I would have tears coming down my face because I just wanted to end the pain so badly. And
Yeah.
I couldn't bring myself to do it. But I knew in that moment that it's a thin line between thinking it and doing it when you're in that dark place. No matter depends on what you face that day, but I mean anything can trigger a person who's in that mindset to actually pull the proverbial trigger, if you will.
Right.
And it was my moment of reckoning. I knew that I wanted to live, and I didn't know how to end the despair. There's no self-help book in the world that would tell you to probably take, I don't think, that would say in this moment of despair, call an 85-year-old woman and take her
Well,
camping.
brother, there is now, man. So more on that later.
I had a couple frames of reference for what brought me joy. And I just thought in that moment, nature is where I need to be right now. And I need to be with somebody who has known me from the beginning.
Mm.
And I know despite our bumpy road, ultimately loves me unconditionally. And she told me that when she was 80 years old in the early days of our reconciliation, after I got back from the AT, that she'd never seen a mountain. And to me, it made sense. That's what we needed to do that weekend.
So here's a man who loses a friend, not someone you went out with all the time, but a guy you knew and a guy who you followed and a guy who followed you and a guy whose smile you recognized, whose life has ended due to suicide. And you go in the mirror and you take a good look at what stares back at you and you realize the line is too thin. I need to change. I need to do something kind of radical. And so you do about the most radical thing you can, which is to reach out to an 85-year-old woman named Joy, who you had formerly a very strong relationship with, but it's faded over time. And she had always wanted to see a mountain. She'd never
Yep.
really seen one. So you're like, hey, Grandma Joy, hey, it's your boy Brad. You want to go see a mountain with me? So when you called her and invited her, what was her response?
Yeah, it was instantaneous. She said, "What time are you picking me up?" And I said, "Well, I can't pick you up because I'm in radiology till 5, but my stepfather, who lives in the same town, agreed to bring her up." But she was completely game for it because her life had been spent taking daily walks around the cemetery, and she got to travel a little bit with my grandfather to Lake Okeechobee in Florida because he was a perch fisherman, but he died shortly after retirement in 1994. So really, since he died, even that little bit of travel was cut off. And so she was ready. She was ready
Mm.
for it. And I sensed that, and hearing that she'd never seen a mountain or an ocean or or any of these places, I thought, that she's still very strong. She's very lively and spicy, and it
By the way,
has,
I've heard your grandma interviewed many times. Lively and spicy are definitely two words I would use for Grandma Joy.
yeah, and unpredictable. Yeah, it's always a dice roll when we're on live TV. uh, I don't know what's going to come out of her mouth, but it's usually hilarious. And I just thought she'll do it. I mean, she was the grandmother who would take her shoes off and get in the stream with me when nobody else would, and she didn't seem to be phased by much. And I
Mm.
thought she was ready. I thought she was overdue for that kind of adventure.
Just take us back to it then. What happened? Where'd you go, and what was her reaction?
Well, we got in the car. You can see in the book all the photos are in chronological order, and you can see the photo that my stepfather took when we were in the teaching hospital parking lot, and I was still wearing my seal blue scrubs. And we take off down I-71 south towards Cincinnati, and that's the first time that I casually glance over at her hands, and I see, oh yeah, she's an old lady. She doesn't act like one, but I wonder how she's really going to do. Like, does she know what she's about to do?
All right.
She's never slept in a tent. I had no idea. Certainly, she's never been on an air mattress. But we arrived at about 1 to 2 in the morning, somewhere in that range, and it was pouring down rain. It had been since we crossed into Kentucky several hours before, and it was just magical. She had an umbrella over my head. I'd put a tent together. I put a tent together in the rain many times. 2009 was one of the rainiest years on record for AT through hikers. So it didn't bother me, but I thought she was just, you would expect to look up and see this face of, what have I done? And she was smiling, and she had the flashlight on me while I was putting it all together. And I took a photo of her when she got into the tent, and you can see she's smiling up at me, and she fell off the air mattress twice that night and laughed hysterically about it. And I did too. She stopped snoring at one point. I thought she had died. So I gave her a poke between the shoulders, and she gasped, and we laughed about that. And the next morning the fog lifted, and she saw her first mountain, but more miraculously, she climbed a mountain at 85. And there were a lot. We weren't fast, certainly we were not fast. But everybody we met was inspired. I knew even then, on that first climb, that she was cut from a different cloth, and that the people that met us were
Yeah.
really touched that these two people were out there hiking that had a 51-year age gap. There was a light switch that was flipped that weekend. There were many other beautiful memories that I document in the first chapter of Grandma Joy and Me, but it was just what I needed to remind myself that life is not inside these walls of the teaching hospital. This is a pressure cooker that very few people will ever experience, but a lot of people are living in pressure cookers.
Mhm.
And we forget to step outside for a second and listen to the birds.
Oh man, so I've been camping a bunch, normally not with 85-year-olds, but with like 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, now 15 and
Fun too,
16-year-old
right?
boys, man. That's where I spend my time camping with my little ones.
Yeah.
And there's not a more miserable sleep in the world than on an air mattress in a tent, whether it's cold, hot, wet, dry, whatever. You wake up sore and crabby and tired and like, oh man, let's pack up and move. And that's me in my 40s. Your grandmother woke up at 85, I'm sure, sore and tired, but not crabby. She woke up vibrant. And I think it woke up a vibrancy within you too. So what flipped for her? Because this is not a good sleep. So it wasn't the Ritz-Carlton. She just slept well on the bed, man. It was something deeper. What flipped within your grandmother?
Well, honestly, I think she was left behind, like so many. She lost two of her three sons in middle age. She was also estranged from my father for a different reason. So she had no contact with the three boys that she raised. Her husband died in 1994, as I said. She was no longer able to work. She worked at a deli until she was 80 so that she could stay connected to the community. And then she eventually got too old for that. Although we try not to say you're ever too old for anything, but it was time that she move out of that working phase of life, surely by 80. And so I think that she was used to a certain level of activity
Yeah.
and engagement with life that was starting to narrow in a way. And so even though this was an extreme version of life that she had not experienced before, it was a counterpoint to what she was living in, which was, I think, a life that was becoming increasingly mundane.
Mm.
So even though it was extreme, it didn't, I don't think she thought of it that way. She was just grateful to be off that front porch.
As you're climbing and seeing the faces of others and seeing your sweet grandmother climb with you, what's changing within you as you're not only able to pull off a night in the tent with grandma in a rainstorm, which in and of itself, if you go to the car, that's a victory. You did something that should never have been accomplished, but now you climb. So what changed within you as you watch your sweet grandmother climb with you?
Even in that early stage of our journey, I started to see the potential for my life differently in terms of, even though I was only in my 30s, I was one of the older students. I was one of the old guys in my vet class or whatever. And we do, I think we're sort of conditioned to think that aging is a downward spiral and that
Right.
that joy diminishes, that adventure diminishes, that our capacity for really living life to the fullest is diminished.
Mm.
And I didn't feel that way anymore. And I also didn't feel that my life was all about my profession anymore. So much was tied up in this idea that I will have lived the life that I was meant to live once I get those DVM initials behind my name. That's self-actualization, that's healing,
Yeah.
that's all the and I didn't want to admit it because I was working so hard and suffering so much to get there that it ultimately wouldn't be the be all end all that I hoped it would be. So it created that space to say, you know what, Brad, it's just a degree. It's important work that you're doing in life, but your life and your identity is not just tied up in your career.
Mm.
And so that's what began to change. And I knew that I had that wisdom on the AT. I knew what life was really about, but I just got swept away in the current. And so that climb was the beginning of a journey back to myself
Yeah.
in very literal ways.
You use the term pressure cooker to describe the veterinarian school and that experience within it. You also use the term mundane to describe your sweet 85-year-old grandmother's life. And I think all of us are living in one of those two worlds right now. And like the polar opposites of the world are set up and established. It's either death through boredom or death through exhaustion as we
Yes,
pursue usually someone else's goal for our life without even knowing it's someone else's. Youth sports, academia, money, success, whatever the thing is, we're climbing the ladder, not even knowing that we're exhausted. And then you step onto a trail with an 85-year-old and you move into this adventure with
right.
like, there's no boundaries anymore. Literally, there's no boundaries. What is it about an adventure that pushes back the mundane aspects of life and allows us to connect not only with one another, but with life itself? So this adventure with grandma, what is this opening up for both of you?
In real time, we were discovering that you can write the chapter of your life that moves you. You can write the chapter that brings a twinkle to your eye and makes your pulse rise and it takes your breath away. And
Right.
we need that. We have all of that out there, and I understand that not everybody has the ability to go to Gates of the Arctic National Park in Alaska, but for some people who are stuck in anguish or despair, just getting off the couch and taking a walk around the block sometimes is what's needed
Yeah.
to set your life on a new path. But it's that first step that's the hardest to take when your heart is broken or when you are just completely locked into the constraints of your existence that the life that is set up for you, or that
Mm.
that you're kind of limited by because of the need to pay the bills and all this stuff. And yeah, it's a really hard question to answer, I think. But for me, it was just, every time we would go to a new national park, we would see things that we didn't know existed on Earth, whether it was a plant or an animal or a color of rock, an insect that was crawling on the ground that I could now see because I was walking slow enough to see it. I mean,
Interesting.
there were so many things that we were teaching each other, and yes, a road trip across the United States by myself would have been a glorious experience, but there's a richness to the fact that this was an intergenerational
Yeah.
adventure because we were both bringing something different to the table that we each needed and we couldn't have done by ourselves.
Oh man, that's so well said. So you hinted at it, but now roar it out. You said when you're at another national park, meaning you didn't just do this once, Brad. It sounds like you did it at least twice, maybe more times. When did you realize on that first hike with grandma that you, as difficult as this first journey was, you might do a second one and maybe even a third.
It was after graduation. I mean, I dropped her off at the end of that Smoky Mountain weekend, and she cried on the front porch because it meant so much to her that we got to do that together. I think part of it was also that she had to go back to Duncan Falls, Ohio, she might not have that taste of adventure again. I think that
Yeah.
was part of what she was thinking. And I drove away knowing that there needed to be something. I didn't know what it would be, but we needed to do something like that again. That was so much fun. It filled my cup and then some. It was flowing over for sure. And so I graduated, took my first job, and within the year, I certainly knew that I loved my job, but it wasn't the be all end all, as I said before. And so I thought a second national park was in order. And then I got carried away one night with my atlas open on my kitchen table, and I started learning about all these other national parks that I didn't know about at all. I had never heard of most of them.
Hmm.
And so I was going to just drive to Yellowstone, but I saw that there was Badlands National Park on the way. And then I looked up pictures of Badlands. My heart started racing. And then Grand Teton was right beside Yellowstone. And then my mind, I just began to daydream like a child. And I thought, how great would that feel if you could walk with your grandmother through a redwood forest
Mm.
and see like her shock that trees could get that large and grow that tall. I just saw it. I saw her looking up at this redwood tree, the Grand Canyon. I thought, what would her face look like if we got up really early and sat on the edge of a cliff and watched the sunrise? What would that feel like? That's got to feel really great. And it just snowballed. And by the time I went to bed at 2 in the morning, I had a highlighted route around the continental United States connecting 21 U.S. national parks. And I thought we could actually do this in a month. Let's try it, and I'll see what she says in the morning.
What did she say in the morning?
Let's give it a whirl. That's her philosophy. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't surprised, but I mean, it's just like, I don't think she really processed what that would be like, but yeah, sounds good. It's better than sitting here on the front porch.
So I've been to the Grand Canyon and the Grand Tetons and the Red Forest, great, the Mighty Reds out in the Bay Area. But for me, as I'm reading through your words, one of the most powerful things that happened was not a tree or a cliff or a sunrise or set. It was a conversation you had with your grandmother fireside. Talk about a conversation you had with your grandmother where she brought something up that you weren't even sure if she knew about, and what she said and what changed within you.
This was the night after we climbed our first mountain in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. So this is that I'm glad you came back to that, because that was a foundational piece to why the journey continued, because I made assumptions about her, and I think a lot of people do this. And once again, this is a lack of curiosity on my part. But I assume, being a woman born in 1930 in rural Appalachian, Ohio, that she probably wasn't a very open-minded person. She was a church-going lady. She loved me, but I wasn't sure that she was wise to the fact that she had a gay grandson. And given the fact that she was in her 80s, I felt like that was a stone that was best left unturned, that it wasn't necessary, that by the time I actually ended up finding somebody and having that part of my life fulfilled in some way, that she might not even be alive to see it. So let's just keep things comfortable. And once again, this is that survival mechanism that was ingrained, or deeply entrenched in my brain from the time I was a little boy, that you learn to just shapeshift. It's safe to be completely who I am and completely authentic with person X.
Yeah.
But yeah, do I want to go down that road with my coworker? Or do I want to go down that road with my grandmother who's 85 years old? No, I think I would be better served by not risking the vulnerability of that disclosure and being rejected. And so I didn't think that I would ever have that conversation with her, and I was content to not have it. But she was astute enough to understand that there were a lot of rocks pressing down on my chest at that particular moment in my life, with everything that I was going through with David Hilton's suicide, processing that. I had opened up to her about my own suicidal ideation on that drive down. So I was bringing her into my world a little bit. And so she knew that I was in a place of profound pain. And she knew, I didn't know she knew that I was gay and that it was something that I was burdened by. And so she very casually, I mean, right before bed, I was hypnotized by the embers that were glowing in the fire pit and listening to the crickets and the katydids, and just a very serene moment. We were close to the river and we could hear the babbling brook. And she just said, your grandfather and I always knew you were gay. And I grew up in the 80s. So a lot of time had gone. This was 2015. And so I was stunned into silence for a minute, and there were literal crickets. And I said, I didn't think you knew. And then she said, I may be old, Brad, but I'm not senile. And she stood up and she walked over and patted me on the shoulder and said, God love you, and got into the tent. And I just sat there, put another log on the fire, and I just thought about my whole life and how exhausting it had been to try to people please and to get approval from everybody and not risk the pain of saying, well, now that I know this about you, I no longer see you the same way.
Mm.
Everything else takes a back seat to this aspect of who you are, this immutable characteristic of who you are. And I don't love you anymore. That's everybody's greatest fear, really. But she took that off of my shoulders in a single sentence. And then it allowed the relationship to blossom. She created that space for the adventure to continue. If she had been less loving, that would have been it. But she had my back, and I knew it. For the first time in my life, I knew that she really saw me and loved me unconditionally.
So powerful. And you mentioned everybody's got something like this, and you're right. Everybody's got something that we know we can't reveal because then we prove how unlovable we ultimately are. We know it. And you knew that about yourself. And then your grandmother said, I know better. I know differently. Just a little pat and a
Yeah.
gentle hug. And here I'm going to bed and I'm exhausted. So you throw a log
Climbed
on
a mountain today. Good night.
Right. I am 85 after all. It's time for me to go to bed. Do you think healing happens faster in conversation or in shared experience?
I think shared experience is more powerful, but they're both necessary. The experience is what creates the space for the conversations. I think we don't go down the road of having these conversations when we're in that hamster wheel
Right.
of doing the same thing every day. There's something about breaking free from the routine and going down this unexpected road with somebody else that you've never traveled down before. And it just there that yellow line on the highway that was coming at me. It was a hypnotic
Mm.
trance that I got into where it takes you back in time and these what else are you going to do when you're driving across South Dakota? At a certain point you have to talk to get through it because there's not a lot to see for a while, and no diss on South Dakota. It's a beautiful state, but there are long stretches where, you just feel like I need to stay awake. And so you have these conversations and you go back in time. And that's what happened for us. And that's where the healing came from. But most of us don't go down that road because maybe we put our toe in the water and we got stung. And it's like, oh, don't go there. Don't go there
Yeah.
with mom. Don't go there with dad. Don't go there with grandma. That's a trigger. We don't want to go down that road. And yet we feel that we haven't really healed ourselves because we haven't been able to get closure in the way that we think we need. And that's another layer to all this. I wanted so desperately to tell my story and have her words reflect back to me a complete understanding and a complete depth of empathy for what I had gone through, that I could let it go and heal.
Right.
But she's from the silent generation. I'm a guy who likes to talk. I mean, I do public speaking for a living. So, as a veterinarian, even. So, it was just this uniquely strange mix of generations and personality types. And yet we had a common family story, but two completely different recollections of that family story and two completely different perceptions of why it even mattered.
Yeah. I have four kids, and if you said, John, who's your favorite? I would say, gosh, them, right? My babies are my favorites. So you have been all over the country and even beyond looking at beautiful parks. You and your grandmother, I think, traveled to each of them. Which was your favorite? What was there a favorite moment outside of the campfire and the hug and just a gentle, we always knew and we always loved you?
Was there a moment where you were watching a sunrise or the stars rise or a coyote howl or whatever it was where you're like, oh my gosh, I want to never forget this moment?
Well, Grandma Joy and Me takes you on a journey to all 63 U.S. national parks because she is the oldest person in the world to begin and complete the quest to all 63 U.S. national parks, a journey that she began at 85 and completed in 2023 in American Samoa at age 93. And one of the journeys that we take, there are a lot of personal journeys and evolutions that we go through in the book and then the journey that we took in life. But one of them that stands out most to me is the journey through fear. And she pushed me through my fear of heights in many situations. And I learned along the way that, once again, my lack of curiosity led me in the beginning of the book, as you'll see, to be a little bit reactive, a little bit volatile when things didn't play out the way I expected them to.
Hmm.
And I learned in the beginning on a cliff in Utah that when my grandmother is afraid, she becomes a cat, like a cat in the exam room at the vet office, where their hairs go up and they show their teeth and they hiss. That was my grandmother. But I didn't know that about her at the time. And the reason that she was a mean cat is because she didn't have an emotional vocabulary to express fear and vulnerability. And so she lashed out because she was scared. But
Hmm.
I didn't know that. Okay. So then fast forward to Virgin Islands National Park when we want to take her out on the water, the still clear water to see some sea turtles, and she behaves like that again. But I had years of reflection on that moment in Utah where everything fell apart and it almost derailed the adventure of going to all 63 U.S. national parks. The fight was that bad. And she behaved that way again. And then I approached it with curiosity and I learned that she nearly drowned as a little girl. And it allowed me to give her what she needed so that she could go out and have that experience to see the sea turtles in Virgin Islands National Park. And she didn't even want to go, she didn't want to go back to the shore because it brought her so much joy. And then to finally answer your question, the moment that meant the most to me because of those moments that preceded it was getting through COVID, finally getting up to Alaska. We're in Wrangell St. Elias National Park, the largest U.S. national park. And I had booked what I thought was going to be a class one leisurely lazy river type rafting experience. And I learned that no, and I could see it for myself. This was a roaring river and class three rapids. And I say, we're not going to go. We can't go now. Grandma, I'm sorry. She goes, what do you mean? She goes, well, I've got this life jacket. And she couldn't even swim, but she was hell bent on getting in that raft and going down the McCarthy River. And I was terrified. I wouldn't have been if I'd been by myself, but because she was with me, I was terrified, but she was glowing. Her smile went all the way to both of her
What
ears.
age is she?
She is 91.
She's
And,
91 going down a class four, class five river in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. So
and
my
yelling, yeah, and yelling, whoopee! I mean, just and she earlier in the book, I take her to Six Flags on a whim, and she rides four crazy roller coasters too. So she's an adventurous soul, but it was because it was the adventure in the face of this historic, profound fear of water.
yeah.
And she just decided after having gotten through her fear in the past, a fear that she was only able to confront because she had that fear recognized by me and had the reassurance that she needed to do it. For me, that was the most beautiful
Yeah.
moment that sticks with me because I mean, I don't think the guides had ever seen somebody her age go down that river.
No way.
But I think at that age, she says, if that's the way I go, it's a heck of a lot more interesting than just falling over on the couch at home watching Let's Make a Deal. That's really her mentality, and I can't argue with that.
Yeah.
She wants to push it.
If Grandma Joy was sitting right here next to me and I said, Grandma, what advice would you give our listeners about their lives right now? You spent a little bit of time with your grandmother. What advice would you give us?
What she tends to say is some version of glass half full, but what she's really trying to say is that if you live on this planet, you are going to have to learn to hold grief and trauma and despair and misfortune, all the icky stuff. You're going to have to hold this in one hand, and you're going to also have to hold the joy
Yeah.
and the miracle and the grace and all the beauty in this hand. And you have to find a way to let the scale tip in the favor of the joy. It's always here and it doesn't take it away. But if you've lost a child like she has, you can live mournfully, or you can frame it as, I was lucky that I had them and that I knew them and I had them as long as I did. And I'm going to live joyfully in honor of them. And so I think that, and it could be anything. It could be any adversity. It could be
Yeah.
any setback in life, any grief that we carry, just to say, yeah, I'm going to feel this forever. It's never going to go away completely, but it is not going to steal my laughter and my joy and my reverence for life.
Mm. Brad, we have 7 questions that we wrap every conversation with. But before I get there, one final question. Those listening to our conversation right now, many of us live a quiet life of boredom or exhaustion, somewhere in between there frequently. Help us decide one adventure we should take this weekend. So if you could be our tour guide in our life just for this weekend, what's one thing we should do to pop away from the couch or away from the sideline activities or away from the laptop for a moment to become more fully alive again? Give us one thing we should do this weekend.
Every corner of America has something unique that you can't see anywhere else, and we oftentimes don't appreciate what's in our own backyard. So find that place that the tourists are going in your county that you've never seen before. Maybe it's a Native American mound that's a historic site. Maybe it's just a metro park that you never took a stroll down, and take your dog on a little walk and smile at the people that you meet.
And I'm gonna add to it. I'm not allowed to do this in the podcast, but Brad can't edit it. It's my podcast, so here we go. Bring the dog, but bring a friend. Bring
Sure.
a parent, or you want to be really, really bold, bring a grandmother if you're lucky enough to still have one. What a gift to not only that grandmother, but to the person who brings her. Just ask Brad if you don't believe me. So, Brad, we have these 7 questions, my friend. They're called the Live Inspired 7. You live these. So, here's question number 1. What's been the most impactful book you've ever read?
Cool book that I read was Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. I read that book after I was out of vet school and I was working at the National Zoo in the Smithsonian Global Health Program. And I just had this epiphany that really I had been hiding my whole life as a survival mechanism. And that was what was really, I thought, yeah, if you don't go for that job you really want, if you don't ask that person out on a date who you really like, then that protects you
Yeah.
from thing of rejection and so forth. And I didn't realize that fear of vulnerability was what was really the number one most limiting factor in my ability to have a joyful life.
Hmm. What is one positive characteristic or one beautiful trait that you possessed as a little boy that you wish you possessed as vibrantly today?
Well, when I was in 5th grade, we went through the DARE program, and the officer came in, and one of the topics that we talked about was stress. And I was like, what is stress? Why would you choose to have stress? Wouldn't you just choose not to be stressed? So there was a time in my life where I really believed that I could manage my stress. And so I could still do better on that front. I have made big strides, but I'm still very prone to stress.
If your home caught fire and all living things are out and you have an opportunity of running back in and grabbing one item, what's that one physical thing you'd come racing back outside with?
We received a bull, a traditional bull from the government of American Samoa when we reached our 63rd and final U.S. national park. There was a ceremony that they held for the elders, and that's the most sacred thing I own.
If you could sit on a bench or at a campfire and have a long conversation with anyone living or deceased, who would you like to be seated next to?
Well, if you read the book, you won't be surprised by this. It would be Dolly Parton. And I we didn't talk about her at all on this hour, so I'm glad we can now. But I think she's the guiding light that we need today, because what we're trying to say on this Healing Across America book tour that we're on right now is that the healing that we so desperately need as a society begins with you. The healing journey starts with you. And that's the road to healing for all of us. And Dolly Parton has always walked the walk when it comes to looking for the good in one another. She's beloved by all for a reason.
Mm.
And we could all benefit from her wisdom.
I want everybody to read the book. I also want them, if they, you're traveling around the country, 50 states in 50 days right now on this book tour. Tell us a little bit more about why you chose Dolly and why we need to begin this journey of self-healing if we want to make this country and this world a little bit better.
I'm like any other human being. I have my own set of values and beliefs, and I have cut people off in the past who I didn't see eye to eye with for this reason or that reason. And you do realize that the more you do that, the more you're rotting yourself from the inside out. It doesn't feel good to be angry, to be locked in grievance, to see somebody as less than because they're not who you are. They don't see the world the same exact way.
Mm.
And I can say that across those 63 US national parks, we were invited into the homes of people in South Dakota, in Oregon, Texas, Arkansas, California, everywhere. And we were able to go into these homes of people who, if we had taken the conversation certain ways, we probably would have ended up in a fight. But we didn't do that because the bridge was my love for my grandmother. And they felt that
Yeah.
profound love. And it made them think about their own lives. And we all have mothers and we all have grandparents and we all have families that we love. And we inherited our values from them in most cases. And so we're all doing the best we can given how we were raised. But the love is real. It looks different sometimes from the outside looking in at another culture or another political belief or whatever it may be. But Dolly is right. Dolly Parton is right that there is a way to build a bridge with most people. Yes, we have
That's fair.
sociopaths and we have malignant narcissists and not, let's stay away from those guys. But yes, just human beings that have a different belief system. You could just sit around the campfire and share warm and fuzzy memories about your grandmother, and that could be enough to
Yeah.
have a really great night.
Mm.
And just to get back to just to honor the humanity of another human being. And it actually feels really good when oh man, that person is completely different than me. But man, we just told a few stories and we laughed. And I can walk away from that knowing that yeah, he's a good person. She's a good person.
Great answer. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Jane Goodall was another one of my heroes, and I was fortunate enough to meet her a few times. And I think another major problem that we face in our society today is that we feel that hope is lost. Her greatest dream for everybody that she met throughout her career, and she never stopped advocating for the planet up until her dying day. She was out there on the road, one audience at a time, letting people know that the natural world is under attack and we are part of nature. And when we see ourselves as being disconnected from nature, we are not going to be able to thrive. We're going to suffer. And your impact as a human being is absolutely essential, even if it seems small. Picking up a gum wrapper off the ground as you're walking to work and throwing it in the garbage can, it seems so insignificant. And yet, if 8 billion people made that same decision today, we would have a much cleaner world that was safer for wildlife and for our drinking water and for the air we breathe. And so it is that idea that the tiniest little action is absolutely necessary to heal the world.
Hmm. What advice would you give yourself at age 20? So if you could go back in time just a couple of years, whisper some wisdom your way at age 20, what would you tell Brad?
You don't have to have it all figured out right now. And it's okay to have questions about what direction you want to go in life. Just try to enjoy the journey. I barely remember my 20s because I was working so hard towards the school of becoming a veterinarian and I was immensely stressed out about it. And yet those were the years when I was never thinner. I was never more energetic. And I wish that I could have channeled some of that energy into making some joyful memories for myself at that time.
Brad Ryan, you've run the gauntlet, man. So we are on final question, number 7.
All
It
right.
has been said that all great people and adventurers and grandsons can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How would you like yours to read?
Brad Ryan took the road less traveled and found an abundance of joy along the way.
Brad Ryan did indeed, trust me, take the road less traveled, found an abundance of joy along the way, in part because he brought his grandmother for a journey of a lifetime. What a reminder, I think, my friends, that sometimes the way to healing is to quietly sit with your thoughts, sit with your life, recognize the beauty that you never saw before, and take someone along for a walk that changes both of your lives and now ours too. Brett, I want to thank you for that journey. I want to thank you for being with us today, for writing the book. Where can people learn more about your book journey?
Yeah, Grandma Joy and Me is available in independent bookstores across this country. You can order it online at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, bookshop.org, anywhere you can find books. It's also, I record the audiobook as well. If that's more your cup of tea, you can listen to it on your next road trip, and I hope you'll take one.
My friends, that is Brad Ryan. My name is John O'Leary. Today is our day. What a gift it is. Live with your soul on fire.
Well, my friends and family members, I hope you enjoyed the conversation today with Brad as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. One thing that really stayed with me is how one invitation changed everything. Brad invited his grandmother to go camping, hoping that she might even see her first mountain. And as the fog lifted, she in fact did. But neither of them could have imagined where that one decision would lead. Generational healing, recovery, love, and an impact movement that is touching lives not only around the United States, but around the world. As I listened to the conversation, as I was part of this thing, I found myself thinking about my own grandparents and my dad. There are so many memories I'd love to relive and so many conversations I'd love to have one more time with them. But once those opportunities are gone, they're gone. They're gone. That's why I think Brad's story matters so much. We all, you and I, have people in our lives today we've been meaning to call, meaning to spend time with, meaning to simply tell them how much they mean to us. We don't need an 8-year road trip to make moments like this matter. Sometimes it's a simple call, a text, an invitation. If you enjoyed today's episode with Brad as much as I did, you will love the conversation I had a couple years ago with Jeff Jenkins. As the host of National Geographic's Never Say Never, Jeff shares how taking his first flight at age 20 sparked a life of adventure, of purpose, and of personal growth. Together, in the conversation, we explore how stepping outside of our comfort zones opens the door to new experiences, deeper connections, and a bigger view of what's possible in life. Check it out at episode 588, anywhere you tune into the podcast. And by the way, I hope you've subscribed to the Live Inspired podcast. If not, click it right now. Subscribe on whatever platform you're tuning in with. Do it right now. You can check out the Jenkins episode at 588. Or if it's easier for you right now, just cruise to the website, johnolearyinspires.com/podcast. We'll have a link to Jeff Jenkins' episode in there. So friends, for this time along the journey, and until next time, my name is John O'Leary. And today is your day. What a gift it is. Live with your soul on fire.
Keeley Companies was started almost 50 years ago by the one and only Larry Keeley. What started as a small family-owned paving company in St. Louis has grown to a nationally known full-service construction, development, and restoration partner. Larry the Legend, as he is affectionately known, has been a part of this growth every step of the way and continues to provide guidance as his son Rusty, my buddy, drives their vision and achieves results on purpose. His unwavering foundation of a family culture with a focus on people has gotten Keeley Companies to where they are today, and their journey is truly just beginning. To learn more about Larry the Legend and Keeley Companies, check them out at KeeleyCompanies.com.